Thank you all very much for joining me here today. Ontario is and always has been a welcoming place. Our province will always welcome those who want to come to our province, set up roots, and build a life. There is, however, a process that is not currently being followed by some. There are very clear rules. There are legal ports of entry for those seeking asylum against persecution. We will always welcome people who follow that process. Illegal border crossers are not following these rules, and the federal government is not enforcing them. These claims are supposed to be turned around in a 60-day period, but the federal government is turning some of these claims around in a 2-year period, 24 months. It's disturbing that the Prime Minister and others are deliberately confusing these legitimate refugees with these illegal border crossers. Frankly, they know better. It was the federal government who has encouraged this, and it is the federal government who continues to usher it in across the U.S.-Quebec border into Ontario. Since 2017, nearly 28,000 people have crossed the border illegally, coming into Canada, and according to our Prime Minister, only hundreds have been sent back. That includes 5,500 here in the province of Ontario. How many is this is not acceptable. This has resulted in a housing crisis in the city of Toronto. This has started to threaten the services that Ontario families depend upon. This mess was created by the federal government, and the federal government should foot 100% of the bills. Despite some reports otherwise, Ontario is not withdrawing from any immigration agreements, nor was this agreement ever discussed between me and my federal colleagues. The Ontario government offers a wide range of supports for newcomers to our province and our country, including employment supports, language training, bridge training programs, and settlement services. These programs and services will continue moving forward. The message that I delivered to the federal government was very simple. It was very clear. If you want to continue welcoming people who cross illegally into our country and into the province of Ontario, then they, and they alone, should be responsible for the housing and settlement costs. I look forward to ongoing discussions with my federal counterparts, who I will meet next week in Winnipeg, and of course our municipal partners. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you. But don't all ask at the same time.
Minister, while we have you on another issue, the first act of the new government, or one of the first acts of the new government, was to give the former Progressive Conservative president a patronage job. Ruben Devlin has been given a $348,000 a year job. You were at the cabinet meeting where that was approved. I'm just wondering, how does this send a message of stopping the gravy train when you're getting rid of Ed Clark on the one hand, who only made $1 a year, and now you're going to have Ruben Devlin as an advisor making $348,000 plus expenses?
So I'll offer a comment on that, and then I'll refer you, I think, to the Premier's office. But I don't think it was a surprise to anybody in Ontario that Ruben Devlin was going to be appointed to that position. We were very clear on the campaign trail that we wanted to draw from his expertise in the healthcare field, and that his job will be reaching out to others throughout the world, in particular across North America and through Europe, to see how we can best advance our healthcare practices. But again, that's all I really can offer to you. I think it's better suited.
What about the broader signal, though? I mean, you guys were elected on supposedly quote-unquote respect for the taxpayer. That was something the Premier talked about a lot during the campaign. He's talked about it since he was a city councillor at Toronto City Hall. And yet the first thing you do is do these same old patronage jobs. I mean, it's like kind of what the Liberals used to do.
Well, this isn't that at all. I think we were very clear that we hired somebody who we campaigned on very clearly over a several-month period, indicating that this individual will be leading reforms in healthcare. So that was a promise we made and a promise we kept.
How do you justify the salary? That's more than deputy ministers make typically. That's certainly more than the Premier makes.
Well, he is going to be worth every penny, and we're going to see that in the results.
In terms of settlement housing costs, have you determined what those costs are?
We're still reviewing it. The Mayor of Toronto has said upwards of $75 million. We're still trying to figure out what the strain is in terms of our in terms of our social assistance in the province of Ontario. Right now, we know that there are about 5,500 people who have crossed the border illegally and then made their way into Toronto. The pressing issue that I have, as the minister who is responsible for children, as well as the minister who is responsible for social assistance and immigration, is this August 9th deadline. On August 9th, across two college campuses here in the province of Ontario, in the city of Toronto, we have to vacate 800 people who are in that emergency shelter. We came to the table with $3 million to the Red Cross, and we came to the table with temporary accommodations for 800 people. The problem is we have a very quick deadline coming, which makes it a looming crisis. And so what I'm simply saying to the federal government, you have resources, you have assets, in the city of Toronto, you're going to need to use those. We're at capacity now, and we are going to be a very compassionate government, but there is a capacity issue around that, and I also fear that if the federal government doesn't act and use some of their resources and their assets here in the city of Toronto, that they will be compromising community centres that families rely on. And as the minister, we're also responsible for children. That really does concern me. So I'm simply appealing to the federal government, through to the Prime Minister as well as to his immigration minister, to take responsibility. No one is disputing that they can make choices in immigration. That is their role. It is their obligation. But they also have an obligation to pay.
But if they don't, what happens?
Well, then they'll be responsible for a crisis in the province of Ontario and in the country. Well, it's hard to say. This is a question you're going to have to ask Justin Trudeau.
There are 800 people, though, in those shelters. Apparently, according to the mayor, 200 of them are children.
Yeah.
Are you saying he's saying he has no space? The province is saying it has no space. What federal facilities do you think are available out there? Because you said that you provided a list of...
We will provide you with a list, but we did provide the federal government with a list if they wanted it, and they do have a number of federal assets around the city of Toronto. But let me be perfectly clear. We have always said this was a temporary solution. We have gone to the table with $3 million and 800 beds for this temporary issue, but there will be a crisis on August 9th. Those college dormitories are for students who are returning in the fall, so that space will be needed. I have asked what the plans are from the federal government and from the from the Mayor Tory's office, so we'll see. But this is something that is very urgent, it is pressing, and we have a looming crisis. And so what I'm simply saying is the federal government has its obligations in international law, Canadian law, and they must pay for those obligations.
You've been very clear that this was triggered by Justin Trudeau welcoming refugee claimants, asylum claimants to Canada, and that therefore the fault lies with him. And you said earlier that he continues to welcome these asylum claimants. What is it that you think he should do at the border for irregular crossers?
I'll let the Prime Minister decide how he wants to allow people into the country. That's not my role. My role here today is to be very clear with the Prime Minister as well as the federal government that while we are a caring and open society and why I am personally a compassionate individual, we have a looming crisis. We have 800 people that were in temporary housing and we don't have the capacity. We have college students going back to school this fall. We will need that space. I'm simply saying we do not have the capacity at this time, and they ought to be thinking about it. They have obligations under international and Canadian law. They must pay for those. And it's putting an enormous strain on the province's resources as well as our municipalities' resources. And again, you don't have to take my word for it. Mayor Tory has been very clear that the shelter capacity is limited and that the money has been very expensive. The federal government, I would like to point this out, the federal government has indicated that they will give us $11 million. That money has not yet flowed to the province or the municipality, and it is about 1/10 of what we likely need. And so I think if Justin Trudeau wants to tweet out, welcome, Canada welcomes everybody, that's great. But he has to be responsible for that. There is an issue of responsibility. And to date, from what I've seen, and I've only been the minister for 7 days, there has been a lot of irresponsibility on the part of the federal government.
Last question.
To my question,
I did hear you, and I did listen.
Thank you.
Listen to your comments, but you basically repeated what you said throughout the news conference. So my question, if you'll heed that or listen to that, is your premise is that and you just said he continues to welcome and welcomed these refugees. So my specific question to you, apart from what you've already said today, is what should he do for irregular crossers? Are you in agreement with what the federal Conservative Party says? What is your position? Because you've made a big point of saying that this is his fault because of what he did to welcome and continue to welcome him. So what should he do?
Well, he's going to have to make that decision. I am not an advisor to Prime Minister Trudeau. I am simply saying to him, as the minister responsible for immigration in the province of Ontario, our most populous province in this country, that we are at capacity. He has created a situation.
The question was, you keep saying he's doing the wrong thing. So you are his critic. So if you're criticizing him, why can't you say what you think he should do?
I am not going to provide Justin Trudeau with solutions. He has a government that he can run, and he can choose to work with us or he can choose to work against us.
If he did the wrong thing, what would the right thing be?
I'm not going to provide Justin Trudeau with the answers to his problems, but what I will say is if he could provide the province of Ontario with money for the crisis that he's created in our province, we would very much appreciate it.
Thank you very much, everybody.